I just really believe that the way that you need to market these days is not the way that most people make content, right? Which is this kind of like audience in mentality, right? Like they think of, what does my audience want to hear? I'm going to make this piece of content. I'm going to throw it into the algorithm. Hopefully I hear a ping at some point and I continue to follow that. I think of a relationship out way of building content, which is, who do I want to know? Who do I need to know? Like who by knowing will my clients find me more attractive and will make it easier for me to land clients, right? I call it digital word of mouth, creating digital word of mouth. If you go out and think of it that way, and you design a content co-creation motion that allows you to offer someone a stage as a way to get to know them, instead of like getting coffee for them, instead of sending donuts to their office, you are offering them a stage. You say, hey man, you know, or lady, I'm gonna interview you. I'm gonna make you look as good as possible. And in doing so, we're gonna become friends. When you Google property management memes, it's depressing. It's all like mental health jokes, right? So what's most important is AI is doing this. You're going to give the market what it wants. But more importantly, while the rest of the world is talking about AI taking jobs, AI is going to right-size job and give people the careers that they want.
Hello, everybody. Here we are once again in another episode of the Viral Genius podcast. And I'm here with a true viral genius, Pablo Gonzalez out of Jacksonville, Florida. Pablo, thank you so much for joining me here today on the pod. How's the weather in Jacksonville right now, actually?
Fernando, the weather is phenomenal, dude. Jacksonville weather it's like right at the north end of Florida. And I think it's much more like Southern California weather than what people associate with like South Florida weather, which is just like super hot and humid all the time. So it's actually pretty temperate here. It's awesome. And can I just say that I love talking to somebody that has a Hispanic name, speaks Spanish as a native language, and speaks English like we do. There's very few, you know, like I feel like it's rare where we can code switch the way that you and I can code switch, man. This is great.
Totally. I mean, I kind of feel like a chameleon. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie with, you know, it's a movie about a guy who's kind of like a chameleon. I can't remember his name offhand, but he actually becomes whoever he's with. I kind of feel like that's the same with me, right? So dude, I can speak with a gringo accent like you, and I can speak perfect Spanish. People can't tell I'm American, but they think, well, you're not from here, but I can't. Are you from Colombia or whatever? It's like,
yeah. I get it all the time, man. And the same, man. Honestly, like I think this can take us right into like our common love for category design, right? Because I think growing up this way in the code switching way, I'm by far the most American person in my family. And growing up, I just kind of adapted to wherever I lived, right? Like I lived in Spain, I lived in Venezuela, I lived in Miami, right? Like Miami is its own ecosystem, right? But
I love Miami.
I just kind of carried it with me and I would just assimilate. And I think that when you do that, you start to really understand what makes things unique, right? Like when you don't have your own kind of thing that's just like your default thing, you're always analyzing of just like, hey, what belongs here and what doesn't belong here, because you're assimilating in a way and you're trying to fit in. And I think in the world of community building, there's a saying that like to be inclusionary, you have to be exclusionary, right? So I think while learning how to belong and learning how to be like others, you also learn exactly how different you are, right? Mm-hmm. Like this idea that, you know, and how you differentiate and where you fit in the brain of people, I think becomes very clear very early when you grow up bilingual. Like,
totally. I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. Not only did I grow up bilingual, but I also kind of had to adapt to a different type of one of my native languages, which is English. English and Spanish I consider both. We lived in the UK for 7 years, and that is a completely different culture. And it's almost a different language than English. And even there, I learned how to assimilate. My parents sent me to a British school along with my sister. They didn't send me to the American school. I was the Yank, you know?
Yeah.
But then when I came to the States, I had an English accent. It was when I was 17 years old. And I was able to get girls easier than if I had an American accent. That was so funny. Well, listen, let's get into the meat of the matter here. I'm fascinated by your story because first of all, we're like you said, we're both category designers. We're both super fans, super consumers of the category pirates, you know, Christopher Lockhead, Eddie Yoon, all those guys. And you have perfectly implemented this with your two businesses. So you have a business called Be the Stage, And you have another business called Vendoroo. Vendoroo is like a, you're obviously going to get deeper into this, but it's a property management type of company. And then Be the Stage is sort of like it's sort of a marketing / event community
Agency.
building type thing. And sort of, and we were talking offline about how one kind of dovetails really nicely into the other, and the other one is like a very great kind of case study for what you're doing with Be the Stage. So I was wondering if you can kind of tell us a little bit about what Be the Stage is and then how you're applying that with Vendoroo.
I would love to, man. 10 years ago at my brother's funeral, I had this giant insight about the power of community when 1,200 people showed up. And I looked around this church and I thought to myself,
I'm sorry about your brother, by the way.
I appreciate it, man. It's shaped my life in many ways. I see it as a giant gift in many ways, right? And a lot of it is because of this lesson, right? This lesson of, I looked around, I saw 1,200 people, and at that point, it didn't matter, what I believed about the Catholic institution. I thought these people are our community, and they've like carried us through these moments up until this moment, are carrying us right now, and I'll never leave this. And I thought to myself, God, you know what? Since I was about 14, I've had like 10 different conversations about not wanting to be Catholic with my mom. And all of a sudden, community solved for churn, right? So it sent me on this. I had this aha moment of the value of community and how it drives business outcomes. And I wanted to, and I've essentially made that the North Star of my life, right? And that's what Be the Stage is. Be the Stage is essentially, I just have gone all in from that moment on. I use these community building, I analyze it. I started using these community building concepts to become a business developer in my prior career. Then I went and joined this like startup up in Jacksonville. That's why I left Miami. And then I started Be the Stage as my laboratory of how to do this. And as you know, when you are trying to change the world from one way of doing it to another, there is no discipline like that other than category design. Right. So like as my missionary like mentality of I need to show the world, I came up with this language that I want to prove that community creation is the future of business development. And in doing so, I became a discipline of category design. I became a discipline of like understanding how to apply that practice. And I merged that with this idea that like, by the way, in category design, you're evangelizing a problem. You have this POV. That POV becomes this bat signal. And a lot of the great category designers that we know of are also great community builders because people congeal around the narrative, right? Like people join on a mission to like go change the world in this way that's beneficial to all of us. And so I started Be the Stage as this thing. I learned category design in order to like build Be the Stage. I would say as a category design job, what I've done for Be the Stage hasn't necessarily, like, I don't think I've really been super effective on my category design of what I do for Be the Stage. But in order to execute community as a business development mechanism for my clients, I've been able to implement category design into it. And it all just kind of like snowballed upwards, right? Like I've had these amazing case studies in the world of real estate investing. I built this like $40 million revenue channel for a turnkey rental property investing company that got me semi-famous in that space. I keynoted this one, like the biggest conference of the year. And a little over a year ago, the founder of Vendoroo, like came in on a LinkedIn DM, and, Vendoroo is essentially agentic AI for the property management space. They're making maintenance coordination, which is the biggest problem in property management. The thing that burns people out, the thing that breaks your business in half because it's so ambulatory and so complex and so hard to build a business around. And they're using agentic AI to make it more human, man. Like, make people that have this like endless list of things that are always overburdened be able to like have agentic take out like the all the mundane tasks. And there's like 19 touch points. If somebody living in your property, their toilet breaks, there's like 19 human touch points for you to be able to like resolve that issue, right? Like we're able to automate like 85 to 95% of that. But in doing so, I've essentially taken like all the stuff that I've learned as a service to clients in Be the Stage and category design, right? And it's like the right moment at the right time of this new technology coming in that creates a new way in the space. And I've had to evangelize the POV, condition the market with these like podcast trade show booth activations that then lead to regular podcasts, that then lead to taking these transcripts and, like publishing this newsletter every single week that now has 5,000 subscribers and drives 12 to 15 demos a month, with finalizing with this book that I published based on the writings that I did from this methodology, which was just taking a page out of your book, man, of this idea of like compiling and compiling all this information, putting this narrative out into the ecosystem, publishing a book. And buddy, what's been happening at Vendoroo has just been a rocket ship, right? Like we've like doubled in size every single quarter that I've been there. And we've been able to like execute on these lightning strikes and do all these partnerships and condition the market in a way that it reminds me a lot of the stuff that you and I have talked about that you do and that I do. So that's why
Can you hold up the
I'm
book
super
again?
pumped to be on this.
Can you hold up that book again?
Yeah, it's the Property Manager's Guide to Winning with AI.
Okay, that looks like a startup book, which I described in my book, the startup book, which is so cool because it sounds like as though with, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like as though what you guys did there with Vendoroo was...
You mean your book right here that I have on my shelf right next to me? Yeah, absolutely.
What? Did I know that you had that book?
No, man, but I think you and I hopped on a call at some point and I've just I've taken many pages out of your book, quite literally, Fernando.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, so listen, you've given me so much information in just a short 10 minutes that I want to kind of dig into a little bit about what you're talking about. And it's so funny because what you said about, you don't feel like as though you're being that effective with the category design for your own thing with B2C as so much as you're doing a great job for your clients. Kind of typical cobbler's kids scenario, right?
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about what is that new category that you are designing with Be the Stage? Because I think it's really important that people see the distinction between what you're doing with that versus like the category parts call it the peanut butter marketing or, just the kind of the marketing industrial complex, the SEO, cold outbound, social media content, kind of like the three-headed monster that's so classic out there.
Yeah, man, I haven't put the Be the Stage POV out there in a while, but as you and I both know, the name of the category matters much less than the ability to like frame the problem, right?
Yeah.
For me, the problem is I think in like 1960, we used to see like 17 marketing messages a day. By like 2007, we were seeing like 700. Today, we see like 10 to 20,000. Right. So the type of marketing and advertising and like all these different things that people have been used to are really reaching this like tipping point of law of diminishing returns. And AI is about to make everything way louder, way more messages, way easier to put it out there.
Tell me about it.
So, I just really believe that the way that you need to market these days is not the way that most people make content, right? Which is this kind of like audience in mentality, right? Like they think of what does my audience want to hear? I'm going to make this piece of content. I'm going to throw it into the algorithm. Hopefully I hear a ping at some point and I continue to follow that. I think of a relationship out way of building content, which is who do I want to know? Who do I need to know? Right? Like who by knowing will my clients find me more attractive and will make it easier for me to land clients, right? I call it digital word of mouth, creating digital word of mouth. And in doing so, right, like if you go out and think of it that way and you design a content co-creation motion that allows you to offer someone a stage, right, as a way to get to know them, instead of like getting coffee for them, instead of sending donuts to their office, you are offering them a stage. You say, hey man, or lady, you're going to come over here. I'm going to interview you. I'm going to make you look as good as possible. And in doing so, we're going to become friends, because when you make people feel that way, you get close to them. And then I repurpose that content and I make marketing stuff for them. I make marketing stuff for me because I have this like point of view of things that I believe, and I'm validating some of that as part of the conversation we're doing, and I'm distributing the heck out of it. If you do that for about like 3 to 6 months, within that amount of time, you're going to have 5 to 10 people that you can combine into some kind of live event. Now, that live event could be a virtual summit. That live event could be a webinar series. That live event could be hey, we're all going to like this one conference because we're all in the same ecosystem. Let's do this like side event where, again, we do like a panel and we do it in person, and you start to get them together. You repeat that motion for like 3 or 4 quarters, and man, you have now created your own center of gravity within whatever ecosystem that you belong, where you're friends with the experts, you have access to the people that you want to do business with, the people that you have done business with, you can share that credibility with as well. And you're well on your way to like having your own community and you're like your own center of gravity with it. And I found that it's a really, really good way to break into a new market.
I love that, man. I love that. And it sounds very similar. You know, you've said that very similar to what I've been doing. I just think with a different flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I've been fascinated by what you're doing, Pablo, just because of that, you know, like being able to kind of provide people that stage and kind of get into that and breaking into that new market. Well, actually kind of, if you could double click on that a little bit more as a great way, you know, talking about a great way of entering a new market, you know, how paint the picture for me as to how somebody would do that with this, or maybe even, you know,
I'll just
give
tell
me
you the
an example.
Vendoroo story, man.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me the
Yeah.
Vendoroo story.
Yeah, Vendoroo, Vendoroo did something really intelligent, right? Like they have this like really great business model where they went from like message market fit to offer market fit to product market fit. And the founder was really intelligent on like getting really good at performance marketing in order to see what messages got meetings, and then took a ton of meetings to figure out what meetings close sales and like what people actually want. So they grew in the property management space. It's a typical SMB space, right? Like local business space where most people aren't so good at performance marketing. And they really grow by going to all these different like trade shows and these kinds of associations. It's really one of these industries where people go to trade shows to actually like do business, right? Not just like because they have to go there. So they grew to like a million in ARR in 6 months, but the big watering hole, right? What was called NARPM, which is like where all, like where the industry leaders meet and, like where the influencers are and where people share stories and word of mouth. They weren't really accepting them. They really didn't know who they were, right? So they
So
brought me in.
NARPM is what again?
National Association of Residential Property Managers.
Okay, perfect. So that's their watering hole. That's where people in that industry go and congregate, and
Yeah.
they see each other every year, and they
Yeah.
kind of like
Yeah.
it's the boys network or whatever, right?
It's the click, right? Like, and that's where partnerships happen, and that's where the influencers are. So if you want to have any kind of like social validation in the market, you got to win NARPM. And it really is one of these places where they're like, well, if I haven't seen you here for the last couple of years, I don't really know who you are. I've got already my friends. There's a lot of there's a lot of new entries into the space, right? Like tight built communities. So what we did was, first, we got really clear on a point of view, right? We figured out this idea that the big pain point in the space is this forever firefight, right? Like this feeling that the job is never over and people get burned out by it. And property management jobs are not really meant for like a human scale. We showed up to these conferences instead of with a big booth talking about like this big fancy AI tool. We showed up with a podcast as a trade show booth. So everybody coming by the booth was like, whoa, what's going on here? Why is there lights and cameras and whatever? We're like, actually, like we're talking to folks about kind of this feeling of like never ending tasks and like how unfair these Google reviews are for you. Do you have an opinion on that? Yeah, I got an opinion on that, this and that. Right. So like we started interviewing people about this narrative. After each conference, we would repurpose the things that we learned into newsletters, and we started and of course we'd give people gift content about them looking like an expert in the watering hole of their space, which is great for them as well. And after like about 3 of those trade shows, we launched an actual podcast called Property Management Framebreakers to continue this dialogue, right? Because like all industries, there's like a heavy trade show season in the spring, and then everything goes quiet for Christmas and New Year's and whatever. And then there's I'm sorry, like the fall, it was the fall, and then there's the holidays, and then there's winter, and then there's the spring, heavy trade show season, then summer goes quiet, and then it starts again, right? So we launched this podcast into the space. And as the podcast started maturing and like we started combining this content and spreading it out all over social media, making ads, putting that into the performance marketing funnel of us being seen with influencers in the space and other big softwares in the space and regular everyday property managers, right? Like having these educated conversations. I was jamming with the transcripts, teasing out the topics that I thought were really like nuanced and like important to this narrative, publishing a newsletter weekly. That newsletter started catching steam and now has 5,000 subscribers, about 50% open rate.
Wow.
And continued that conversation into that that spring season where, because of the newsletter and the podcast, we also launched this virtual summit, this AI summit, where like the other players in the space, I found this one coach that was like the guy that was coaching on AI, that was the speaker on AI. I'm like, dude, you got to be the guy on AI. Why don't you be the host of this virtual summit? We'll put this thing on. We picked out a couple of other softwares that we wanted to integrate with and be guilty by association with. Had like 700 people show up to this virtual summit. That was before the biggest conference of the year. At that point, the NARPM, the organization, realized that I'm a freaking content machine, and I offered them to make content about their educational system. And if they gave me like an extra room at the broker owner, that we could do that for them. So they gave me this extra room. I used that room to like do that, plus call it like the AI Alliance Pavilion. And I had this huge lightning strike where we drove $2.5 million worth of business in like 36 hours, because it was just overflowing with people. And we told this narrative of like, hey, AI is now a teammate that you can hire. And we had people testing the different agents and rating them, and 75% of them rated it an A player. Right. So like we had this like stat up on the screen. So that drove a giant narrative in the business of like, oh, this thing's ready for prime time, really filled our buckets. And then after that, I just continued the podcast until this next season. I needed a new trick, and it was this book. Right. So like continued the conversation. By the time this new trade show season hit, I was able to take these newsletters that I've been publishing, right? Like I had probably done about like 40, 50 newsletters at this point. I then organized them into The Problem with Property Management and the New Promise, Understanding AI, Building a Business Around AI, Wealth Creation with AI, and What's Next. So I picked probably about like 18, 19 of these newsletters, chopped off the ending of it where the call to action is, gave them each a title, wrote an introduction, wrote a table of contents that story told, wrote introductions to the sections, wrote a conclusion, and voila, I got a book. And now we're in this new conference tour where I'm literally throwing books from stage to people, and we're giving out books. And guess what? A book is like the ultimate trade show tchotchke that everybody wants. And you compile that with like, oh, and you get it signed by the author, and you give them this experience. And people are literally going home after the conference, calling us up and saying, I wasn't sure at the conference, but I'm 60 pages into the book. I'm in. Where do I sign? So it's just been this compounding ball of like influencing the narrative in the space with this hybrid motion of content co-creation and like distribution and publishing that's really, really working for us, with, of course, a killer product. But you need that when people are afraid of AI and not sure why they want to change. Like you need like this like social validation to happen. And it's just been incredible.
I mean, it sounds like as though what you were doing is a series of lightning strikes that culminated into a big mega lightning strike. And then you got your POV out there with the podcast, with the newsletter, and with your book, and so, golly, you just laid out so much on me right here, which is fantastic. But I think, I almost think like as though this sort of frenetic level of activity, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Frenetic maybe is not the right word to use, but it's kind of what you need if you want to establish a new category, right? Which is what Vendoroo was doing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yes. What I think you need is hand-to-hand combat of meeting people and have them, like when you are new, right, to a space, which a new category will inevitably be new, whether it's in the mind or you're just a new team coming into a space doing something very, very disruptive, right? Like people can't judge you by your track record because you're new. So how do they judge you? They judge you based on like, oh, well, I've seen you before. And they'll judge you even better if they're like, I've seen you before with this dude who's an expert and you guys are talking the same language. And, oh, I've seen you before with this dude who's an expert. And now I've seen your clients out and about, and I know who your clients are, and I know what other softwares you do business with. And that really does happen in these moments of connection with people where you are spending time with them. Now, it's really hard to just always be networking, but if you are networking while content co-creating, then you're building scale around that spreads well beyond just those relationships, right? So, not only did the relationships help, but these iterations of all these, I think we're like 70 episodes into the podcast at this point in just over a year. And that includes these like podcasts as a trade show booth activations where we'll probably do little mini interviews with 25 to 50 people per show. So all those iterations have informed the point of view that we first started with of like, oh, the forever firefight, blah, 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 blah. That's still in there. But we realized that the real problem is churn. The real pain is the market doesn't see our value, so they leave us early. And, it's that kind of like interaction with the market that allows you, it's understanding your super consumer and spending time with your super consumer that illuminates what the thing they most care about is. And if you can wrap yourself around the thing that they most care about and show that you are directly solving that in a way that nobody else is, you're going to win.
So this is I think is really important. So you started off with the pain of the never-ending revolving door of, trying to put out the fire of maintenance issues, complaints from tenants and then it's just, you can't really scale it, etc. But then you found like the deeper underlying pain, which is churn. And so, and just to clarify, are you talking about the churn of people working for the maintenance company, or are you talking about the churn of property managers contracting out the services to an outsourcer? Like, what was the churn part?
The answer is yes. Their clients are churning and their team is churning, right? But
Okay.
yeah, it was the root cause of it is how impossible the job is to do. But and that's what we started talking about. The real pain of it is my clients don't value me the way that they should value me. And I can't build a business when everybody's quitting because, because this sucks for them to do.
Yeah.
Right. So like we really dug into that piece. And now thanks to the book, right? Like, this, when you write a book, it's one part kind of like getting your message out, but it's also one part formulating it, right? Like as you're writing and as you're creating this stuff, it really refines the way that you get to talk about it. And that piece has really illuminated, how to talk about this in a way where when you engage someone with it, they're like, oh yeah, you see them like, it's what Lockheed does, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you see them nodding along like, yeah, I feel this pain. And then you're like, and this thing is coming. They're telling you that the way that you show value is by proving the returns you give to your clients. And that makes a lot of sense. But here's what it's not doing, right? It's not actually right sizing the thing. It's not actually giving the market what it wants, which is these things that we show the data of.
Mm-hmm.
And now, right. And like the things that we hang on to is this idea that owners want more control, the owners of the properties, right? So the owners is the client of the property manager. Owners want more control. Owners expect responses within the same business day for anything that they ask, and they want issues resolved within 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And when we tell them that, they're like, we can't do this, right? Like that's impossible to do because one question might take me 3 hours to answer because I got to go figure out all these things. And then you show, well, what we're seeing is that AI today, instead of having to like work order die for 6 hours to answer a question, you can just ask AI a question. Instead of like, having to coordinate all these different meetings to figure out when the resident is home and when the vendor's available and blah, 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 and when you can go fix it and try to figure out what's wrong with it. The AI is available 24/7 the moment something goes wrong in a property to start working with the resident to figure it out first and then get that ball moving. That's shortening issue resolution times. And, AI is now able to create a new process just because you said it and implement it forevermore, as opposed to like having to design a new flow chart and then train your team and whatever. So we're starting to be able to give people more control. So we're about to be able to give the market what it's always asked you to do. But most importantly, like these jobs that are burning people out, when you Google property management memes, it's depressing. It's all like mental health jokes, right? So, like we end with this like idea of, so what's most important is yes, AI is doing this. You're going to give the market what it wants. You're going to go win the market if you're all of a sudden giving it what it wants when nobody else can. But more importantly, while the rest of the world is talking about AI taking jobs, property management's different. Property management jobs weren't meant for people. Like they're burning people out. In property management, AI is going to right size job and give people the careers that they want. So, boom.
I think what you've been saying here is so powerful because really that's the power of category design, which is uncovering those really painful pains, the painful pains those acute pains that are like people are suffering through, but are not really surfaced
Yeah.
verbally, and people are not
Yeah.
really discussing. And so I think Lockheed is always talking about this, or is it Eddie Yoon or whatever, or they both talk about it. You know, you tell me about my problem, and I know you want to help. Tell me about your solution, and I think you want to sell me, right?
Yes.
So, you know, you uncover this problem that was sort of like the non-obvious problem. Maybe it was obvious through the memes, but it wasn't obvious from a business point of view in terms of people trying to solve that problem. You uncovered that, and then you came up. Then that's how you were able to position the AI agents and kind of turn the narrative around of AI taking jobs to AI enhancing jobs. Then, and this is where I want to take this podcast, is where the rubber meets the road, which is, okay, once you've made that really critical discovery, is then taking that to market. How are you taking that to market? And so the trade show booth podcast activation, how did you come up with that idea? I think that's really cool and unique.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I honestly think it's one of my best ideas I've ever had. And I've been doing it since like early 2019. I'm pretty sure I would have built Be the Stage around that had COVID not happened right at the end of year one of Be the Stage, right? Because there was no more trade shows. How I came up with that, man. Oh God. As I was thinking about what I was gonna do next, right? Like I had this like insights in my construction career. I went and joined this like startup here in Jacksonville. I jumped into like a dumpster fire, turned that around in like 10 months, hosting Zoom events, 2018. And once I turned that around, I was like, all right, I have enough here in my thesis to like go off on my own. So I took a 90-day purposeful pause to figure out what I want to do with my life. And that's where the language of, the future of community creation and blah, 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 blah came from. Right at the end of that purposeful pause, I was like, man, I need to go speak about this stuff. I know I'm a good speaker. I'm connecting with conference organizers. I want to go talk about this type of stuff. And I had started already in those conferences that I went to in the 90-day purposeful pause, already like interviewing people after conferences to like I was making like content about the attendee in order to like try to connect with a conference organizer to get a speaker spot for the next year kind of thing. Right. So as that's happening, there's this conference in Miami called the Emerge Americas Conference. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's where Latin American and North American tech unite, right? And I know the conference organizer, right? So I knew that he was launching this like e-commerce brand. So I hit him up because I just spent a year in e-commerce. I wanted to give him like advice. Turns out I didn't have good advice to give him. He was already doing everything that I was going to suggest. But as we're wrapping up that call, he's like, "Hey man, you thinking about coming to Emerge?" I was like, "Oh, actually, yeah. I'm glad you brought that up." And he's like, "Listen, man, let me ask you something. We're trying to become more of a content brand like TED. And I wonder if you have any ideas about that, because I just got off the phone with like the founder of TED. I was like, God damn it, Tony, like just didn't give you good advice before. Now you tell me you already have better advice that I can give you." But as we were talking, I'm like, well, let me ask something. Are you making content at the event? And he's like, well, yeah, we got the keynote speeches. I was like, no. Are you making content with the people attending the event? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, dude, if you just give me trade show, like if you give me booth space, I will come to Emerge Americas. I'll show up with a camera crew. We will interview the people going to Emerge Americas about what value they bring to it, because people are not going to events anymore to see keynotes. They watch that on YouTube. People want to go to events to like meet other people that are at these events. So if you can quantify that, you're going to win. And he's like, holy cow. Yes. So he like gives me the space. I like Huck Finn this thing. I find like an event marketing company in Miami. They do it for free as a way to like get the leads from the event. I ended up interviewing 25 founders of different startups inside of Emerge Americas that were there in 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
We repurposed the content, gifted it to Emerge Americas, gifted it to the people. And I saw that they weren't posting it. So I was like, wait a minute, I'm just going to post this. And I just started posting all this stuff on LinkedIn. And as I was posting it and talking about them, and tagging them, my LinkedIn started blowing up. Like all these people were like, oh, I see this person over here and who's this other guy? So that was kind of like the birth of it. And what I realized is that when you have a trade show booth, most people are like in this fishbowl, right? Like they're just kind of like walking by, trying to not make eye contact, see what kind of like toy they can grab from your booth to give to their kid when they come home.
I've been there, done that,
Yeah. But if you have lights and a microphone and a camera, people are swinging by going, who's on TV? what's
Yeah.
going on here, right?
Yeah.
And then if like your team engages with someone that's walking by, like, and they're like, hey, what's going on? You're like, oh, actually, we're interviewing thought leaders of this conference about this and that. What do you think about it? And they say something interesting. You're like, dude, that's really interesting. Do you want to be on the show? And they're like, yeah. So now you bring him in and you give him like a really good experience, right? Like we did it for the conference organizer. Now I do it as an exhibitor, right? Like you give him a really good experience with an executive in the company, you build a relationship. And that's a very effective way to like draw people in. And then when you have a team in the Philippines, like I do, that's really good at repurposing content. And the next day, your salesperson's following up like, hey, we made a sizzle reel of you and here's a gift. And they're posting it online. And they're like, they look like a celebrity at a conference and they're tagging you. You're now winning the conference on and offline. And then a week later, you're not following up with like, oh, here's my pamphlet or like, here's my PDF of my products. You're following up with like, oh, hey, we're going to post this thing long form. Can we hop on a call so I can get to know you better? It's just like a massive differentiator that I've productized. I'm now doing this for Lenovo and they're doing it at the Gartner symposiums across the world. And it's been epic.
So wait a minute. So Lenovo then, so you're implementing this with Lenovo. So Lenovo is the one bringing the podcast booth at this Gartner conference.
Lenovo has booths at all these different Gartner symposiums, and they're using this podcast as a trade show booth activation as the like their way to draw people in.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been cool,
man. Yeah, this is this is true innovation over here in category design thinking. So you did that with Vendoroo, and then you turn that into a regular podcast for Vendoroo, where you were, like you said, guilty by association by interviewing all these thought leaders in the industry, clients, etc.
Our clients that are succeeding, right? Like the bigger players that I want to do business with, everybody.
Exactly. And then you talked about the big lightning strike, which, I wanted to get into a little bit more about that because you talked about that in detail, but what you did was, so what did you do with that big conference, sort of like at the end of this 12-month period?
Yeah.
You sponsored you were a sponsor at this big conference where you all were speakers, or like, what was the nature of that lightning strike? If you can get into a little bit more detail about that. And I know you talked about that already, but I feel like I wanted to slow you down a little bit more on that.
Yeah, no, I think that was like one of the biggest home runs I've ever hit in my life, man. So because NARPM, the association, I got on their radar doing this content at their trade shows, right? I found out, again, you enter through the problem. I found out that their designations, which used to be a big revenue driver for her, right? Their like certifications were like lacking. Right? Like they're lacking this year because now there's like, it wasn't just NARPM that offers you how to know how to be a property manager. Now there's 10 dudes on YouTube telling you how to do it. Right. So I told him, I was like, listen, I think that you guys do a really good job of marking your designations inside of NARPM, but I think you need to create value for the designation outside of NARPM. Like you need to give people content to market their designations. And if you guys give me like my own room close to the expo hall at their big conference that has all like the brokers and the owners of property management, I can do this podcast trade show booth for you. And we can make all this content that you can do to promote your educational services. And you can do it as a perk for the people that have this thing, right? So it's like you give this like experience to your team as like, this is why you want to do this, right? So they're like, yeah, cool. They were like, yeah, that sounds great. Kind of like lukewarm on it. I went and did it at a local chapter and I showed it to them and they're like, oh my God, we do need this. So like 30 days prior, they're like, okay, we're going to do this. And here's the room. When I looked at the room, it was right at the entrance of the expo floor. And it was like a 1600s or like a 2200 square foot room. I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Right? Like I can't just put like a little stage on the side. I need to activate this thing. So at that point, like I told you, I had done that virtual summit, that AI summit, where I was able to like get some more partners and whatever. I told these guys, hey, I'm going to turn this room. Like, yes, we're going to, dominate one piece of it, but this is for y'all, right? Like, let's make this the AI Pavilion, right? Like, let's make this where everybody goes to learn about AI. And so I co-marketed it with them. And we set up, we set up our like activation. We had these like anthropomorphized kind of like Daft Punk looking robots that look like our logo as our AIs that had these like quotes in it. I got this like circular structure with quotes from the podcast of people that had been on the podcast alongside with quotes by like Satya Nadella and about AI and whatever. Like I put that all around. I made and quotes from the founders of these like AI Alliance companies. And we just made this thing like the place that you go to learn about AI from these other companies, but we also are kind of dominating the space. And we ran performance marketing ads. We did like a geofence of like the zip code of where the location was. And we just throttled the shit out of it through the days that the people were there. It's like, go to the AI Pavilion, like do these things where you can learn about AI, don't get left behind. You're already there. And we just had I felt bad for people that were just in the regular expo floor because we were just slammed the entire time. And like I told you, we told this narrative, right? Like we kept the narrative going. What the story, the from to that we created in that room was
The
AI.
from to, yeah.
Yeah, right. AI is no longer a software; it's an employee, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like that's what we're saying in that room. And we had people messing with the AI. We had these demo stands where the TV is showing the demo. You walk up and there's a tablet here. And when you walk to the tablet, we made these like Snapchat filters of like putting like the logo, see the logo behind me? It's like a little kangaroo with like AI goggles. It would put like the AI goggles and the kangaroo ear on someone and be like, this is you inside the machine. Like this is a copy of you doing this. And they'd like demo the thing. And at the end, we would ask, hey, if you were looking to hire a maintenance coordinator and you put out a job ad and when they showed up, they were this good, would you say this is one of the best kind of like maintenance candidates you've ever had? This is an above average maintenance candidate. This is an average maintenance candidate, or this is a below average candidate. That was A, B, or C, or D. And then we just had like a live interaction of, 75% of people called it an A player, 18% called it a B player, like 3% called it a C player. Nobody else called it anything else. So we were just pumping that story, and we drove $2.5 million worth of business that day when we walked in there as like $1.5 million ARR company.
So what I think is so cool here, and I'm gonna make some assumptions here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is first of all, you really got to have your point of view really dialed in, right? So which is the problem, the from to of the problem, from the like the before and after is what digitalmarketer.com talks about, and then your point of view for how they get to the problem, from the problem to the solution. Okay. But being very clear on that POV, that gives you a lot of liberty to be so creative,
yes,
around that whole thing, right? Because you know what your limits are, or what lane you are going to be in, which is promoting the hell out of this POV. But then you could be so creative for how, like doing the Snapchat filters, which are fantastic, doing the geofencing, having all these places where people can play with the AI, doing the activation in the 1,200 square foot room, which I think is so cool. But it all comes from this POV, because otherwise people are just going to be spraying and paying. If they're praying and spraying, if they don't have a POV, if they're not clear on who their super consumers are, what the real problem is, and then the POV for how to go from their problem to the Shangri-La, to the Nirvana, then they're not really going to have a rhyme or reason to what they're going to be doing with their activations.
Yeah. And I'll add one more thing that, Fernando, I don't know if you've thought about this, but yes, you were right. Specifically inside of an event.
Mm-hmm.
I think an event is a moment in time on a journey, right? And that moment, it's like a scene in a movie, right? And every scene in every like good movie has like a reason for being there, right? It moves the story somewhere. So the event needs to have one motion, right? Like one thing that you go from to. The POV is the movie, right? That is the journey that it goes on, right? Like that is, like, yeah, that is the entire story you want your market to live. Now, what the POV does when it comes to it's, from spraying and praying to tactical execution of content, of events, of whatever, is that I think of a POV, right? And a POV has certain elements, right? It has the current state, it has the problem with the current state, it has how the world is changing, how the problem's going to get worse. It has the problem, the villain, it has the future state, it has the, it has the new way, it has all these different things. And if you're very clear on, it has where the context shift is, it has the new missing, it has the innovation, right? Like if you're clear on all those things in your POV, that creates a taxonomy for where every piece of everything that you're doing falls, right? So like now every piece of content I create or every experience I create, I know where it is inside that taxonomy because I'm so clear on my POV of like where this thing fits. So, like some people will go too hard on like future state, right? And that's all they promise. Or maybe they dial in too much on like the new way, right? But like I know that I need to have a well-formed story that has this cast of characters. And I need to be feeding those cast of character scenes and lines in a movie, right? Like, so as like something else Lockhead says, the mental scaffolding of it is, right? Like it creates that taxonomy in your mind of like everything I'm doing, where in this POV does it fall? And if it doesn't fall in a part of a POV, then it's just arts and craft. And if you've already done enough in that part of the POV, then you're just like mentally masturbating, right? Like, but you need to know where all this stuff is so that you have that complete story and people can like and can catalog it. So even when I'm editing podcast of like what clip I'm pulling out, I'm pulling out clips of the podcast. Where does this go? Like, what is the from to that's happening in this clip, and where in the story does it fit?
Yeah, yeah, and you also kind of have to have a very keen sense of where your market is at. Kind of like reading their minds in a way, because if they're not ready for the future state yet, maybe you got to kind of dial it back and kind of continue to hone in on the problem. So that they're more aware of it, or if they're already very sure about the problem, they want to see the future state, etc. So it's like, you can't rush it. You can't hold them back. You got to really kind of be in tune with your super consumers. So let me ask you this. How do you feel about all this? Do you feel like, do you feel like as though you're on cloud nine? Does it sometimes feel like as though you're going through a rough patch? Like, how, like, is this roller coaster ride, or are you always, walking on cloud nine?
Great question. Right now, this morning I had an anxiety attack. That being said, Fernando, like I feel that I'm doing the best work of my life, man. Like I have never gotten more meaning from work than I am right now, because I feel like I am using every part of me and I am here for a reason. And like this whole journey of everything that I've learned happened to having like stumbled into category design because I was trying to figure out community. And then my biggest client being this like, you know, rental property investing company that got me into this space, that allowed me these like, like a certain level of whatever. I feel like I'm doing like this book is, one of the best pieces of work I've ever done in my life. That lightning strike was one of the biggest home runs I've ever hit in my life. I've always wanted to be in the room with the smartest people doing the biggest shit. And I've never felt that way until right now. And it's terrifying, right? So it comes with self-doubt, and it comes with imposter syndrome, and it comes with anxiety. And at these shows, I've got 2 shows coming up in the next 2 weeks. I don't know if you're an Outkast fan, but this album that I have behind me, one of the songs is called Elevators. And there's a verse in the song where the guy runs into somebody from high school, and the guy's like, "Yo, man, I know you got money. I know you're famous." And in the song, he goes, "No, man, I'm kind of just like you, right? Like, but I live beat to beat, because if it don't move your feet, then I don't eat." Right. So he's like saying, like, I still got to produce. Right. And I feel like every one of these shows, I got to go make a hit. And it comes with this like adrenaline rush of anxiety. And then we go and we walk out and we crush it and we win the show and we're the talk of the show. And I'm on cloud nine. And then there's another show coming on. I'm like, I got to make another hit. And then next quarter, I got to think of like, what's my big concept of like, like that beginning of this year was that lightning strike. This time it was the book. I don't know what I'm going to do for Q1 of next year, but man, my brain is firing on all cylinders. So yeah, dude.
What was the name of the crazy again?
Elevators.
Okay, man. I'm going to put that on my rotation. Oh man. Oh, here we go. Elevators, me and you. Okay, perfect. Wow.
Yeah.
You know what? I definitely do not want this to be the one and only interview we do. I want to be able to kind of follow back up with you in 6 months and see where you're at. This has been really such an energizing interview. I tell you what, the interviews I've done with the category pirates, I think are some of the interviews where I come out of the interviews, with so much enthusiasm and excitement. I interviewed Chris Stanley as well, the mini book guy. I
reached out to Chris when I was putting this together, for sure, man.
Oh yeah. He's helping me with a client right now in his book project.
Yeah.
Right. And then when I interviewed Eddie Yoon, et cetera. So this is fantastic. Where can people find you? I know this is the cliche podcast question, but I think, Pablo Gonzalez on LinkedIn, right?
Oh yeah, because there's only one, right? Listen, man, it's really hard to find Pablo Gonzalez on LinkedIn. If you want to find me, the number one thing that you can do is leave a review for Fernando's podcast. Leave a review for Fernando's podcast. Send him a screenshot of it. I'm sure you're connected to him on LinkedIn, and he will connect us, right? Like as a content creator, we live for these signals of like, you're listening, I'm bringing you value. Do something nice for Fernando, and I'm going to want to be your friend. Otherwise, good luck finding Pablo Gonzalez on LinkedIn.
Gracias, hermano. And, you have fun in Jacksonville. I'm actually in Mexico right now, Uruapan, Mexico, which is the avocado exporting epicenter of Mexico right here. So if you eat avocados that have the sticker that says avocados from Mexico, it's probably from here where I am right now. So
let's talk about that one day.
Yeah.
Fernando, you know what I would like to do, man? Have you had somebody interview you for your podcast?
No.
I would like to interview you for an episode of your podcast if you'd like to do that. Let's do that. Like after I'm done with this trade show season, let's do that like in November. Because I bet you I can pull out, I know that you're doing very similar stuff to me, man. And I want to pull out your genius too.
Perfect. That sounds like a plan. Let's do it, man. Cool, and right, man. We will see everybody in the next episode of the Viral Genius Podcast. Ciao for now, guys. Bye-bye, Pablo.
Ciao.
If you want to get more of the Viral Genius Podcast in your inbox, just go to startupstrikes.substack.com and subscribe.